Okay, I got a thumbs up from the camera guy. Hi guys, welcome to Sunday morning at DragonCon. Yay! So in a minute here we're going to talk about melee weapons in sci-fi, but first I would love for everyone to give a round of applause to the lovely and really mad at me now, Sue Phillips. As you will see, Sue is holding this season's most sought-after fashion accessory, the DragonCon Charities donation can. Ooh. Sue, behind you.
I'll start it.
Yep. Thank you. So this year's charity is, you guys know what it is?
Cure childhood
cancer.
Childhood through cancer.
Yeah, wait.
No? Oh, no.
That's kind of a dick joke, dude. So here's the deal. Your spare change basically helps nuke childhood cancer. So if you put it in this can, that's like the little caveat.
The convention will match up to $125,000, so we want them to.
So
yes.
Make DragonCon pay up.
Yep. The convention will match up to $125,000. So we're gonna pass it around. Is that right, Sue?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna pass the can around. If you feel inclined, that would be great. Let's just make sure everyone gets a shot at it, and then it ends up at the table in the back for the staffers. Okay?
And because this is a sci-fi con, we're going to nuke it from orbit because
it's the only
way to be sure.
Yeah, that's right. Good call. All right, so while that's happening, my name's Kacey Ezell. I'm going to go ahead and moderate this panel for you guys. How's this sound? Is it good here?
Yeah.
Okay, because I can get closer. Yeah. We are going to talk about melee weapons in science fiction. But first, what I would like to do is have my amazing cohort. I'm gonna call these guys my harem. I'm just gonna go my melee weapon harem
does not go on
here.
YouTube.
My platonic melee weapon harem of experts. I'm gonna have them introduce themselves, and we'll start with Jeff next to me, and then we'll go to Mark and go on down the table. So, Jeff, who are you? Tell us who you are and what you write.
I'm a meat popsicle. No, I'm very tired, so I'm a little silly. My name is Jeffery Haskell. I go by Jeff, but my pen name is my legal name. It made sense on the cover. It looks good. I write military sci-fi. I got my start writing superheroes. I got my start writing urban fantasy under a pen name, but then I switched to superheroes because I had no idea why people liked urban fantasy, and it bombed. And so I wrote superheroes, and I know why people like superheroes. And then when I got good enough, I switched to military sci-fi because it's what I wanted to do my whole life. That's the Cliff Notes version. I've got a 6-book series. Book 6 comes out on October 10th of military sci-fi called Grimm's War. And I can tell you all about the characters or whatever, but it wouldn't make any sense. So what I will tell you is if you read the book and you liked Run Silent, Run Deep, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Robotech, you'll love the book. And you'll come away feeling like a better person for having read it, because if I wanted grimdark, I could look out the window.
Yep. Awesome. Mark?
So my name's Mark Stallings. I write military science fiction, wuxia, Asian fantasy, and sword and sorcery. So, I got my start on military science fiction, the Four Horsemen universe, through Chris Kennedy Publishing. That's my novel up here. I love melee weapons and basically mechs and everything Jeff was selling. I need a signed book.
You come by the panel when I'm there.
I'm John R. Osborne. I write urban fantasy and military science fiction. I'm one of the core authors of the Four Horsemen universe along with Kacey. And I specialize in military units, basically Vikings in space. So melee weapons in mechs.
Yeah.
I'm Stuart Grosse. I write game lit and supervillain stories. I do villains as protagonists. So bad people doing bad things for fun and profit, and they win.
I'm Kacey Moores. I write military science fiction, largely in the Four Horsemen universe, as some of my cohort and/or harem here. Not my harem, sorry, Kacey's harem, other Kacey's harem. Girl Kacey, I'm boy Kacey.
Yeah, that's the convention, you guys. I'm girl Kacey, he's boy Kacey. A 4-year-old made it so.
Yep.
Who's now here at the con as a 24-year-old.
Yeah, true story. I also write military fantasy. I have a post-apocalyptic that just came out in December. My background also, I was an Air Force Rescue and Special Ops C-130 pilot for 20 years. I've also trained in various martial arts, and I do have extensive writing using melee weapons in science fiction settings.
I take back all the things I said about the Air Force. They're awesome.
That's right.
That's what they all say. Yeah, and like I said, I'm Kacey Ezell. I write science fiction, military science fiction, fantasy, horror, some noir, bunch of stuff. And I too am a retired Air Force aviator, only I flew Air Force helicopters instead of fixed wing. And I'm a current EMS helicopter pilot. So not necessarily melee weapons, but lots of blades involved in all of that. Okay, so let's start off with kind of a softball. Gentlemen, I'm going to call upon you randomly, and I would like for you to tell me about your favorite melee engagement in science fiction. It can be in film, it can be related in a book, it can be on TV, but not one of your own, one that someone else made. We're going to get to your own stuff here in a minute. So let me start off with, I'll start off with Stuart, because I know you the least of my platonic melee weapon harem. I feel like we need t-shirts.
My favorite melee weapon takedown would have to be anything from the Horus Heresy in Warhammer 40,000 with chain swords, which are, for those of you who don't know, it is a chainsaw that is in the shape of a sword, and they hack people with it. It is beautiful and gory and awesome.
Excellent choice, excellent choice. Oz, you're next.
So this is nothing saying that this is at all practical. However, I think my favorite melee engagement is the Batla fights in TNG.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Especially, when Worf goes up against Duras. Yeah, we all know Batlas are not practical, but damn, it was cool.
The clang, when he drove it down on his chest, the clang when
Because
he
it
hit
goes-
the deck. Oh, you stole mine, man.
Okay, so since he stole your thunder, I'm going to give you the option. You can either go next, or if you need a minute to think of a backup.
No, I got it back up.
Okay, go with your backup.
The Dune, the Chris blades,
Yeah.
and the slow blade. Yeah,
In the movie or in the book?
In the book.
Okay.
But I also like the movies.
Yeah, I do too.
Except for that Sci-Fi one. I didn't like that one. The Sci-Fi Channel one.
Yeah.
That one was not like the book at all. But the movies.
Sting and the cod piece is great.
I mean, yeah, you can't go wrong. I wish she was here. The slow blade defeats the shield. That whole knife fight was just inspirational to me, and I use a lot of that in my own stuff. So it's really great. Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Mark.
So, writing in the Four Horsemen universe, I was a reader before I became an author. And so I was actually redshirted by John, and so he has a unit in there called Bjorn's Berserkers. And the leader of the Bjorn's Berserkers runs around with a frickin' battle axe and chops aliens in half. I mean, that's
In
gotta
his
be-
Casper combat suit.
Yeah, like you can see
his
on the
mech,
cover
yeah.
of the book. Yeah, they have mech suits of armor so that they can survive alien attacks. And he's running around with a frickin' battle axe. Gotta love it.
All right, boy Kacey.
I'm gonna go horribly sideways and bring up the Princess Bride, the duel between Wesley and Inigo.
All right, you get half points because I did specify sci-fi,
specify
but it is an
sci-fi.
amazing duel, so fair enough. Yeah. So traditional sword, but lots of footwork and
Banter.
banter.
The
Yeah.
banter, the morning commentary.
I'm not left-handed. Excellent. All right. Very good. So let's talk about this then. So why then are we, why do these things stick out to us? Why are we so fascinated with this concept of melee weapons in a science fiction? And we're gonna, for the purposes of this panel and this discussion, we're gonna define science fiction as a technologically advanced, to our level of technology and beyond, environment. Why do we always want to pull out sharp, pokey things when we have arguably more technologically advanced options? Jeff, we'll go with you.
Oh, I was really hoping you let me go first.
Yeah.
Sir, why do we have to use a knife when all the enemy has to do is push a button? Put your hand up there, son. The enemy cannot push a button if he does not have a hand to push it with. Medic!
All right. Okay.
Now I want to jump in and say that was hilarious in that scene, but then you go and read the book and there's this whole discussion about like weapon, what is it, gradual escalation of force,
Yeah.
sort of, and the weapons of mass destruction. It's a very deep and philosophical, yeah.
Do you want to
movie and the book
summarize
are
it for us?
completely unrelated.
Well, essentially, it's sort of like you're in a bar fight and somebody pulls out a knife, and now people are pulling out guns, and eventually you get to nuclear weapons if you follow that to its logical progression. So, being able to fight at the lowest basis level can sometimes prevent
Yeah.
mass destruction, you know?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Oz, what do you think?
I think it's because it makes the fight personal. You know, if you're pushing a button, sending a missile at someone you can't see 200 miles away, or shooting them, across space with a laser, you're not seeing your enemy. Using a melee weapon, makes it very emotional, visceral, and up close.
Yeah.
It also works better for like movies and TV, so that way they can see both actors.
Yeah, sure, for sure. So again, not sci-fi, so half points to myself, but it puts me in mind of that scene in Saving Private Ryan where they're in the building and it's this real gutty scene.
That scene gave me PTSD.
Yeah, where you have the two combatants and the one
Often.
is very slowly stabbing the other. Yeah, for sure. Good point. Stuart.
Because when you're up close and personal, if you turn around a corner, a knife is better than a rifle because of just space.
Yeah, close quarters.
So close quarters happen, especially on spaceships, because you don't want lots of room that can be explosively decompressed. So you have close quarters, and in close quarters, something that you can just poke or stab or slash is often better than the super powerful battle rifle.
Some things don't react so well to bullets.
Yeah, that too.
Careful what you shoot at.
Mark?
Well, the melee weapons evokes that primal instinct of getting back to our caveman past of we've just got something in front of us and we're just going to stab it until it stops moving, regardless of what it is. Chainsword, batleth, vibra knife, anything. It just evokes that visceral, just impact and conflict that just gets you that, especially from watching like Dune. I love the new Dune movie, and I'm a classic Dune. I did like Sci-Fi Dune too, but the Jason Momoa scene where he's going up against the enemy troops and just
Sardaukar?
the Sardaukar. Well, when they stab him and he falls down and then gets back up and just pulls the knife out of himself, that sword out of
It's
himself,
always be
and then goes right into the next group. Can you imagine being that fourth guy in line? Well, crap, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Did I get all of you?
Elvis.
I gotta make sure every member of my
I stole my
harem
turn,
gets their
so.
say. What's that?
I said I stole my turn, so.
Yeah, no, you're. It's aggressive. I appreciate that. So let's talk. So I'm glad you brought up Dune because I'm going to do what a moderator shouldn't do and answer her own question first and then let them talk.
But you're one of us.
One of us. One of my favorite things about the book Dune, and I loved the way that they portrayed it in the most recent movie. I'm a big fan of the most recent movie. I'll just go on record and say that. I love the way that they portrayed it was that there was. I loved Frank Herbert's answer to why the hell would you use a knife in a technologically advanced society where we have and so he invented the shield. The slow blade defeats the shield, I loved that mechanism for making it make sense. It's pure hand wavium still because we don't know what the heck is a shield, right? But it worked and it made the story better for it. So my question for each of you is, what do you use either in your own work or what have you seen other people use that you really like that allows melee weapons to make sense within a technologically advanced society, story, etc., etc. So, boy, Kacey, we'll start with you.
Well, in my most recent novel, Companion to Darkness, I have a blind samurai in a technically advanced Four Horsemen universe. They have Caspers and battleships and tanks and all those things, and he is essentially Zatoichi, the blind samurai from Japanese cinema classics. But he's also with a Adeptic, the cat assassin hunter race, and in that context, they're assassins. They close in, they kill, they find ways. He specifically is very unobtrusive. He can wander in someplace and he's the blind one, but for some reason he's the one that they don't see because they completely discount his capabilities or even his just existence because he disappears in plain sight. So that's where I see it very useful, is in the assassination context.
Okay, all right. Stuart.
Well, because I do game lit and lit RPG, melee weapons work because the system says so, which makes it really easy for me to do melee weapons in my books. Because the system came online and these things have good stats, and you need a certain class to use firearms. So bam, you now have swords and spears and things. Have fun.
All right. Oz.
So in the Four Horsemen universe, a lot of the aliens like to charge in up close and personal.
It's cultural.
Yes. So you have those first few seconds to get you in, but once they're at point blank range trying to claw you out of your suit so they can get the meaty morsel inside, you're going to have to fight them hand to hand. Basically all Caspers come equipped with an arm blade, and some go even bigger with their melee weapons.
Yeah.
But if they don't know how to fight hand to hand, and there's a werewolf or a giant spider or an angry bear trying to peel them out of their suit, then they're hosed.
Mark.
So in Prodigal Son, we basically have a mercenary unit that's based in New Orleans. And if you imagine a future where you have armored combat, you have constantly evolving mechanized suits, and you have Cajun rednecks that like to grow up on WWE and Demolition Derby, we created a group called the Olympians. And these Olympians go off into space, and they're rock'em sock'em robots. And so they go into a space station, and you can't be shooting missiles and giant cutting laser beams in a space station if you want to try to rescue the people that are in it. And so these guys go rock'em sock'em robot on the aliens, and just imagine just rocketing down a hallway with jump jets and just doing a power slam into the don't care bear.
Yeah. Jeff, and then I'm going to answer my own question, which is also what a moderator should not do. So, go ahead.
I'm all for you answering your own questions. I think that's great.
That's because you're a rebel. So.
I am a rebel with a cause. So I write very realistic military sci-fi. Not to say that they don't. I'm just a different tack, right? Some people call my stuff hard sci-fi. It's not, but it's harder sci-fi. And it's very much our current military in space 1,000 years in the future. In 1951 or 52, there was a battle in Korea between the U.S. Marine Corps and the North Korean Army, or I guess they were the Chinese Army disguised as the North Korean Army. And it lasted like 3 or 4 days. Forgive me if you're a historian, I forget the name of the battle. I'm really tired. My father-in-law was in it. Say again?
Was it Incheon?
Yeah, Incheon, yeah. Incheon Reservoir. And the survivors from the North Korean side later on said the thing that they feared the most was hearing the Marines yell, "Fix bayonets!" And I have Marines in my book. And in my books, I play to the great parts of us as humans and as military people. I don't rub people's face in the dirt. So all my Marines carry knives. And at one point, and knives are utility weapons, right? They're not just knives, they're screwdrivers, they're hammers, they're cut ropes, can openers, the whole bit, right? So it will always make sense for military personnel to carry a blade. Forks. No matter what, even if it's never useful in combat. So at one point, my Marine squad is on an enemy planet, and they're infiltrating the planet. They can't have any weapons, and they're translators with them, the guide, and he's like, "Do you have any weapons on you?" And the main Marine, Jennings, is like, "Are they going to scan us, or are they going they're gonna search us. He's like, scan us. Then no, we don't have any weapons. And he's like, wait, you can't have any weapons. He's like, we got knives, and they won't find them because we're Marines. And he's like, what's a knife gonna do? And one of the Marines says, a Marine naked alone could conquer a city by noon. Give us a knife and we'll have the planet by dinner. And that's the kind of stuff I write.
Yeah.
And there actually ends up being a really cool couple of knife fights at one point because they got to kill somebody silently, and there's nothing better. I don't speak from experience, NSA. There's nothing better to kill somebody silently than through the back into the lungs with a knife, as Riddick would tell us. So yeah.
Or Christopher Lee.
Or Chris, yeah. Although according to him, it made a gasping sound.
Yeah. Effing Christopher Lee.
Yeah. So not only am I breaking the rules, I'm really breaking the rules because I actually have two answers. When you mentioned the fixed bayonets, I actually wrote a story in the Four Horsemen universe specifically because it's called Bayonets, specifically because I wanted to do an homage to the Battle of Little Round Top in the U.S. Civil War.
At Gettysburg.
What's that?
At Gettysburg, yeah.
Yeah, at Gettysburg. If you've ever seen the film Gettysburg, it's a very famous clip with, oh God, what's the actor's name?
Jeff Daniels.
Yep, thank you. See, this is why I keep the boy version of me around. With Jeff Daniels, very famously sitting, he's out of ammo and options, and he's like, all right, well, we can't run away, and if we stay here, we can't shoot, so let's fix bayonets. And all of his junior officers are like, sir? And they don't say it because it's a Civil War, but you can see them being like, sir, what the F? And he's like, yeah, we'll fix bayonets. Well, you mean charge? Yeah, we're going to charge, but we're going to charge swinging down the hill like a door. Like we pulled this side back. Like, obviously I've watched that clip quite a few times because I'm quoting it to you now. But anyway, it's such a dramatic moment. And it's perfect for a story because it perfectly, in my mind, encapsulates one of the things that people love about military science fiction, and that is that human spirit, that interplay of teamwork and camaraderie and structure, and us against them, and we're gonna our backs to the wall. It's do or die time, and we're going to do this because we don't have a choice. Whatever happens, we're not going to give up. And so I had to do a bayonet charge in a world where you have things like Mac rounds and orbital artillery and things of that nature. And so I had to think of reasons to make that work. And it's amazing what an ionic electrical storm can let you get away with. So that's how I did that. But then my second example of making it work in a highly technological environment is one that I can thank Michael Z. Williamson for. He wrote the Freehold series, and then he did an anthology called Forged in Blood. And it was a very cool concept because this particular anthology follows a single-bladed weapon from medieval Japan all the way through to like far future space combat, and my story was one of the far future space combat stories, and it was a boarding action. And in the context of a boarding action in this technology, Mike let me invent a type of like directed energy ablative armor that would render directed energy weapons like lasers unusable, and you can't use traditional projectile weapons in a space environment because of punctures and vacuums and space and stuff. So that leaves melee weapons, and so that was the reason why we were able to feature that particular sword in that story. And I thought that was kind of an elegant example in doing a space boarding action. So. Yeah, please do.
Peter F. Hamilton wrote a book series called Deathstalker, which is awesome. If you've never read it, you should. And his main weapon was plasma weapons, but they had a crystal in them that had to charge, and so you'd fire your plasma weapon, and then you'd have to have a 2-minute charge.
Yeah.
So everybody pulled out their swords and started hacking each other to death while they're waiting for the plasma pistols to recharge. It was very reminiscent of muskets and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you guys got any others you want to talk about before we move on?
Just to tack onto yours, I also loved how you created the cutters. I assume that was like a human culture or something that had basically they grafted blades into their skin and things
Yeah.
as part of their.
Yeah, they were
Making-
so they were an alien culture that revered melee combat, like just culturally, and so their warrior caste would graft blades into their skin surgically, so that they could be more effective in melee combat. But their non-warriors wouldn't engage, and that was one of the things that the characters discovered is the non-warriors wouldn't engage; they would just kind of cower and run away.
Yep. And I guess I'll be the one to bring it up. Space wizards with laser swords.
Oh yeah,
Always fun.
yeah. No, that's a great example. That's a great example. So
25 minutes in before we mention lightsabers.
pretty good.
That's kind of open.
The first panel we started off with Star Wars. It was,
So actually, that's a really good segue because my next question is, so now that we've made a melee weapon make sense within the context of our technologically advanced civilization, how do we incorporate those advanced levels of technology into the melee weapons? So you mentioned the crysknives, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the chainsaw.
Chainswords, yeah.
Yeah. So what are some other examples of either from your own writing or from things that you've seen or watched or played in games? Because I did not read I am not versed in Warhammer at all, but I have seen what's that game that my husband plays where they have basically it's a chainsaw.
Is it Gears of Gears?
Gears, yes. My husband he played a bunch of Gears, and I've watched several hours of that gameplay.
Chainsaw Bayonet.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's a very cool concept. So let's talk about some of those technological melee mashups.
Well, also from Warhammer, you have power swords, which basically has a field around the blade that gives a monomolecular edge, which means it cuts through pretty much everything like butter.
Yeah.
Kind of like a lightsaber.
Yeah. Very cool.
Or the powered hammers. So they have giant
Wait.
war hammers that have.
Is this all from Warhammer?
all
Yes.
Warhammer.
Yeah. What else? What other examples?
They also have lightning claws, which are the same as the power swords, except Wolverine
Okay.
on power armor.
What other examples not from Warhammer?
I'm trying to remember what vibroblades were from. I think that might have been Star Wars.
Star Wars. Yep.
Star Wars was vibroblades?
I think they also had them
First
in.
introduced in KOTOR is like a way to get around not everyone has lightsabers for melee combat.
It wasn't actually.
Oh, okay.
There was a book series in the 80s that was about Han Solo, and they were in that.
Oh yeah, Han Solo at Star's End.
So
That's definitely not where I heard them.
explain
But yeah,
vibroblade. What is a vibroblade?
Oh, it's just a blade that. Okay, this is Star Wars, so it's not science and it's
Yeah.
not military science fiction, but it's a blade that vibrates
like
really fast, like
yeah.
at ultrasonic speeds, and
Cool.
then allows it to cut through stuff.
That's cool.
Take the battery out and it's useless.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's still a knife, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what can we do with a knife? And a marine?
Yeah, that's right.
Playing it in a day.
Oz, you got an example?
Actually related to the monomolecular sword, back in Ring World, if I remember correctly, they had the monomolecular, that's probably the first place we saw that was the idea of a monomolecular sword.
Yeah.
And I think it was just like a monomolecular wire suspended in a magnetic field, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And I mean, think about something that's monomolecular, that's scary as F.
Yeah.
Even scarier is from, cyberpunk worlds like Shadowrun, where you have a monomolecular whip.
I was just gonna say,
Johnny Mnemonic.
I played the F out of Cyberpunk with that mono wire.
Yep.
That thing was baller. Did anybody else experience that thing? Yeah, I ground quite a few levels with that bad boy.
In Shadowrun, if you use the whip and you critically fail, you chop off your own arm.
Yeah,
No,
Not a lot of my players used it.
slightly risky. Slightly risky.
Well, yeah. I mean,
So?
how long would I live if I actually had a real lightsaber?
The most realistic lightsaber scene is in actually Boba Fett when Din Djarin cuts himself trying to use it because he's not trained in it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I don't actually do anything technologically advanced with my blades. They're just knives, which are, if you've ever been attacked with a knife or seen a knife fight, are scary enough on their own.
Yeah, sure.
But there are things like vibroblades in my universe. No lightsabers though. The one thing I do is there is one person who carries a monocrystalline blade that is basically a one molecule crystal, and there's like a glowing field around it, not to help it in any way, but because it's the law, and you have to be able to see the blade, that it's like dangerous.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
one molecule would be invisible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, the edge is one molecule.
So,
Well, to go back to 40K, sorry, but it's also been used in a lot of other things, or the power fist, or gauntlets, powered gauntlets, or electric gauntlets, things like that. More punchy
that's a-
things. We
Let's
talk about
take
like
fists
slicey
and
things.
make it
Yeah.
Let's
bigger.
pummel people harder.
no, that's true. That's true. We've been focusing a lot on blades. Well, let's give me your favorite example of a non-blade melee weapon. And if you talked about, like Oz, I know you talked about Bjorn and his hammer. Pick something else. Something you haven't mentioned.
Bjorn has an axe, not a hammer.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
However, my example is Mjolnir,
Mjolnir, yeah.
out of the MCU series.
Okay, half points for not strictly science fiction, but fair enough.
I beg to differ. The Asgardians are an advanced society with advanced technology,
But it's set present day.
not when they're on Asgard.
All right, I'll give you 3/4 points. How about that?
All right. Rogue One, the scene where the blind guy beats up a whole bunch of stormtroopers with a stick,
That's a very good example. Yeah. very good
because
example.
stick
force
to
is
the
with him.
head is going to ring your bell and put you on the ground.
Yeah, Casey, I'm gonna put you on the spot because I know you know the story better than I do. Japanese sword master, one guy you couldn't
Miyamoto
defeat.
Musashi, yeah, he was.
With a stick. Yeah.
He intentionally showed up late to a duel, and then he rode up on his rowboat because they were meeting on an island or something like that. I forget where exactly, and then when it was shallow enough for him to stand, he jumped out, grabbed an oar, ran up, beat the guy to death with it, and then ran back to his boat. That's the
Not
short
the story I
version.
was thinking of, but also a very cool story.
Oh, sorry, different story.
Wasn't there a story about like there was one duel he lost and it was to a peasant with a stick or something like that?
No, he's famous for saying he doesn't fear the experienced swordsman, he fears the amateur.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be thinking Robert Jordan. Totally different genre, but he did something like that at the time.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Well. Okay, but I am going to give time for questions, just FYI. So go ahead, sir.
It was, he actually won a duel against a guy with a bow staff, who then retreated, had a dream, shortened it to 4 feet, and then came back and defeated Musashi.
Okay.
Get the joke.
Interesting. Very, very cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see. Oz, you got a bludgeoning weapon you want to talk about?
So, I mean, this is radical. In the movie Serenity, you had the Reavers that would grab a ship and spin it around and throw it at other ships.
I guess that's bludgeoning. Yeah.
Using a ship to attack another ship. I mean, you're.
So is it bludgeoning or is it a kinetic weapon? Because that's not me.
Well, bludgeoning is a kinetic weapon in a way.
Well, but is it a ranged kinetic weapon?
Ship-to-ship melee.
Ramming speed.
If they're connected when it hits, then it's a flail. If it's not, then it's a sling.
Okay. All right. Glad we got those hairs split. Do you have another bludgeoning weapon you want to talk about?
Yeah, in 1957, this little-known author wrote like one of the most influential books of all time and created an entire genre that I now write in, and it was Starship Troopers, written by Robert Heinlein. And his guys had gorilla suits, armor. When you hear them say in the movie, "You apes will live forever," it's not because people were descended from apes, it's because the power armor in the book made them look like apes.
It's also a quote from World War I.
Just want to get that right. Yeah, I mean, and he served. So
Yeah.
It is a quote from World War I. And he, so in the movie for the most part, or in the book for the most part, they shot nuclear grenades and fired weapons at the bad guys. But there are some times when they had to punch people, and I imagine being punched by power armor that can lift a tank would not be fun.
Yeah. In the Four Horsemen universe, actually, most of the enemy combatants that our human mercenaries come up against are not, like they said, they're closing fast because they're using their sort of natural biological advantages in a lot of them in bludgeoning ways. Like the Ugar that we call the big purple don't care bears, stuff like that. So yeah, absolutely. We mentioned a little bit, you mentioned Din Djarin cutting his own leg with the technologically advanced lightsaber. Let's talk a little bit about melee training in science fiction, because I think that's a sort of underrepresented piece of the whole equation. What have you seen, or what would you like to see, or what have you done in your own books that addresses this question of how the heck do we learn to use this stuff? So, have I started with you yet?
No.
We'll start with you.
But I'm gonna go into the horrible. I mean, I've trained in martial arts for 20 years. I mean, I've done Aikido, Aikido, various forms of karate, Chinese martial arts, Bagua specifically that uses sword, and you don't train with live blades. And so in Kenobi, where they're like, hey, let's do some lightsaber training, and they both turn on their laser swords, and they're hacking at each other, I'm like, what?
Well, they did it in A New Hope.
You don't heal back from that.
They have the Force.
Oh my God! No, the force isn't that all powerful. I mean, otherwise, if you were, I mean, two force-sensitive people, are they going to know? They trick each other, and wah ha ha! I got up on you. I could have cut your head off. I mean, no, you slip, cut your own arm off. I mean, it's crazy. So, I mean, you do have to have a reasonable application of training and a reasonable application of force, and you can't just have anybody pick up a bladed weapon and go up, like, even though Musashi was afraid of the untrained swordsman, because they would do the unexpected, right? They weren't trained in very formal chess match type things that you see in Kendo or Aikido.
They get stupid.
They do. They pull something out because they don't know any better, so then they're going to try things that they think might work that you then don't expect. And the untrained swordsman can beat the blade master.
Yeah.
But you gotta have some sort of training or expectation of training. Or in a military science fiction world, you're going to have an assumption of, hey, they went through basic training or advanced combat training, and they just throw a couple sentences in saying, hey, I went through, what do they call the Marines, the McMap course? Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jeff.
All right, so I don't know how much melee combat training the Air Force does, but we did 3 days in basic training, and it was ha, ha, and that was it. So, despite what movies make you believe, military people don't actually train in martial arts or knife fighting, because it takes years and years and years and years for you to be any good and stand a chance. I am not as versed in Mark, but I did take karate when I was a kid because I was constantly getting my butt kicked. And my sensei, who was Japanese, said, if a fight lasts more than 3 seconds, you lose. You do not want to get into a knife fight. If someone pulls a knife, you run, because everybody loses in a knife fight. It only takes 1 or 2 cuts and you're going to bleed out and die before the ambulance ever gets there. So knives are stealth weapons. You use them to either surprise somebody or kill somebody instantly, or as quickly as you can. There is no knife fighting in a realistic sense, unless you have like shields like in Dune, where you can't be hurt by the knife, slicing your forearm.
Armor of some sort.
So I have a Marine who uses, I forget the name of the knife, somebody who's a knife expert, tell me the knife that goes on your finger. What is it?
Karambit.
So I have a corporal who uses a Crombie, and these 2 guys are coming down the stairs, and they've got guns, and he's at the bottom of the stairs in shadows, and they don't see him, and he charges up at them, grabs the first guy's gun, dude's dead. He doesn't even know it yet, but he's dead, because you don't get sliced wrist to armpit and not die, and that's what a knife is for. Or slitting the throat from behind. NSA, this is about books. Or stabbing people in lungs.
Hi, Agent Johnson.
Right.
Yeah, that's my
It's okay.
FBI agent. Is
No, it's very
curious
cool.
about my search history.
It's very cool that you're passionate about it. I was just wondering if you wanted to actually answer my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Kacey. You're doing such a great job, and I'm screwing everything up.
That's all right. It was about training.
Oh, right.
Yeah. What have you done or seen that addresses this
I started off like
easily
that,
ignored,
and I
as
went
you
off my
see,
tangent.
piece of the equation?
The Marines in my books train on their own. It's not something the military teaches them. Peter Nalen wrote a great book called Ice and Monsters. and for Nick Cole and Jason Ansbach's
Galaxy's Edge.
yeah, those guys. And the Marines go to another planet, and the Marines don't train in melee combat unless it's on their own. And the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps goes, or the Marines there, he's like, oh, okay, who brought the tomahawks? And like every Marine pulls out tomahawks, even though they're not allowed to carry them. And it's just something that when you're in the military, if you want to do something like that, I knew a ton of guys who threw knives in the barracks, even though they weren't allowed to, just because they wanted to know how to throw a knife. And they wanted to be able to do it if we ever got into a war. So yeah, it's all stuff that my Marines talk about it on occasion, like how they train on their own with knife fighting.
But it's all self-directed.
But it's all self-directed.
Huh, interesting, cool.
Which is kind of
Yeah,
normal.
yeah. Go ahead, Casey.
Sorry. Well, I was just agreeing that mostly in the real life military, despite what you see in like the media most of the time, it is going to be self-directed for most of it. For any of us that want to learn more than just like 3 days of whatever, unless we've taken a specific course that was provided, which is rare in most of, at least completely non-existent in the Air Force, to be honest. But
you got helicopters that shoot things.
one place where I thought that obviously Heinlein is one of the forefathers of science fiction, and in Starship Troopers he goes in he goes at length about how in their martial arts training and basic training they pull from the knowledge of the student, from the people in the trainees essentially. One of them is the son of some grand master of something, and he winds up being in charge of the martial arts training. So that's one where they've sort of at least expanded or put some thought into that, how that can be a little bit better than the processes that we really have. But one completely different aspect that I love to explore, we touch on in the Four Horsemen. I've seen it in a few other places, specifically when you move up to larger machinery and you're in things like the combat armor suit personal, the Casper, or combat suits, or maybe even mechs. There's martial arts training that we can have as a person, on a mat, or one-on-one person training with melee weapons, fighting with swords. Then you get into a big giant machine. You're kind of relearning it all over again, but some of the basic movements are still there. The concepts, the ideas, all those things still exist. You just have to learn how to do it much bigger and with much more power.
Yeah, and perhaps most importantly, the mindset, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Oz, you got something? Training wise?
Yeah, and they may have done this in the E-Youth, the Young Jedi series, although I never read it, but a simple way to fix the Star Wars problem is for them to have some sort of training saber.
Yeah.
And, because like, for example, for Kenjutsu you have Boken, right? Or Shinai. There's no reason why, since they hand-wave every other piece of technology in Star Wars universe, they couldn't have some sort of, like, training saber that's just like a blunt force field.
They have them in the games, in the video games.
That way and then they also could give someone the opportunity to write a master who beats his opponents with a training saber.
Yeah, that's always a cool trope. Yeah, for sure. Stuart?
Well, because I don't do military, my training for things is different. When it's supervillains, they train on their own because they're villains and they don't have a support system, obviously. But
that's a really good point.
For my game lit or lit RPG stuff, the training is provided by the system. So like, they might pick up a sword and not have the skill. They wave the sword enough times, stab something with it, and now they have the skill, and the more they use it, they rank up.
That's cool. Yeah,
so
good point.
The system, when you're doing game lit or lit RPG, a lot of things that don't make sense in real life are covered by the system says so, or magic makes science sit at the kids' table while the adults talk.
Awesome. All right, so we got, a minute ago my watch told me that we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we have time for questions. So what do you guys want to know about melee weapons in science fiction? Sir, here and then there. Go ahead.
So you had spoken about like the lethality of knives. And Star Wars recently sort of written themselves into a kerfuffle about the survivability of getting Ranger with a lightsaber. When you
I bet Qui-Gon is ticked.
Yeah. So when you write like combat sequences with melee weapons that somebody's going to be injured but survive, like how meticulous do you want to be about explaining why someone survived something? Because like I, as an audience viewer, don't know enough about human physiology to really know what kind of stab wounds are easily survived or sometimes.
Were you talking to me or anybody?
Anyone,
Okay.
you're just trying to
Do you have an
choose one
answer?
from you.
Well, the thing is if you're stabbed, you're not going to know if you're going to survive or not.
Okay.
So it's not like a gunshot wound where like someone shoots you in the chest and you die. You can be stabbed and die 20 minutes later. There is an artery on your inside of your thigh, not from experience, that if it gets sliced, you're dead in 30 seconds, and you won't even know it. You'll think you're fine, you won't even feel it, and then you just fall over dead. I've used that in a book. The thing about knives is you don't pull them out until you either A, have to kill somebody, or B, you're about to die.
That's a lot of things they can stab into you, and they're always doing it in everything that you've ever watched. They're always pulling it out immediately. It's just, I mean, it's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
Like any sort of manning ability, they're just meant to like exploit you.
So you're asking if we as authors need a character to survive a stabbing.
how do you go about, like,
how do we
doing
do
that?
that?
There's an immediacy of the care, and there's also a level of technology in whatever universe we're writing in.
And there's also where they got hit.
Yes. Yeah.
And so there's definitely a lot of ways we can play with that. There's how soon we can get a medic to them. There's what kind of technology we have available to us sometimes in
Magic healing.
Yeah.
In the Four Horsemen
Yeah.
universe, we have a little bit of a semi-hand wavium nanite injectors that can provide immediate care and at least stabilize by rushing to that spot and coagulating things quickly, sealing things up.
So then as an author, what you're doing is we're making the decision of why is that character being stabbed? What is the impact that we're trying to elicit from them being stabbed? Was it an inconvenience? Was it a high point of a combat? Was it, hey, John, I will avenge you kind of a thing. Here, have this nanite pack. I'm going to go run down the hall. Hope you live. Good luck.
Yeah.
Demonstrate
Kind of thing.
conditions
So
to
we're just trying to decide what will advance the story. What will elicit the right emotional response from you, the reader, so that way we can advance the story.
And in answer to the other aspect of your question, because I think you said something about how much research you have to do.
Yeah, like I as an audience viewer, like I don't really have
Right. My advice to any authors out there is make friends with medical personnel because you will have questions, right? I am constantly bugging my nurses and my flight medics like, okay, I need someone to break a femur and survive. How can I make that happen? You know, and they have the answers, like they know because they've seen it. So
Unfortunately.
There is a fair amount of research that goes into it if you want it to be believable enough that when your fans who are paramedics and flight nurses and doctors pick it up, they don't go, well, this is bullshit. They don't know what they're talking about. Sorry, it's not 10 o'clock. I apologize. This is BS.
I might take the mic from you.
Yeah,
But
take it away.
I do have a Marine at one point get stabbed in the back through a kidney with a knife. And if we're talking about like how you do it as an author, one of the things you never want to do is make it so they're okay on the spot,
Right.
right? So the
Because
guy-
why do the injury?
Yeah, the tension's gone. So he gets stabbed in the back by a knife. He instantly passes out because he's spurting blood everywhere. And I do have nanite medicine.
Like Ahsoka, what is it, episode 2?
Spoilers.
We can avoid it.
Spoilers.
I do
Well,
have
so no-
nanite medicine in my world, but it's very limited. It's like trauma packs. So like it heals, it stops the immediate life-threatening part of it for the most part, but you only have like a few minutes. You have to get actual medicine.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry I didn't answer your question originally, but yeah, that's how.
That's another one of
This has
those.
all been great. Thank you.
And depending on, and because I don't do military, like I said, in game lit or lit RPG, you don't die usually until your health points run out. So that makes things different. It also means I don't need to research how things actually work because it doesn't matter until your health points hit 0.
It's cheating. It's lazy writing. So,
Yeah.
That's another one of
Some of my
those.
books actually have dice rolls in them.
throwing it out there. We had one right up here, and then the gentleman in the back, and we might be out of time by that point, but we'll see. Go ahead.
So with a lot of melee weapons, and even continuing into a lot of your examples in sci-fi melee weapons, weight and mass is important to the weapon.
Yes.
Yes.
So how would you handle ultralight weapons that have, say, directed energy fields or monowire suspension?
In terms of the impact to the victim or wielding it?
Changes in how you wield it, since the weight is different, or like how it would impact other people.
It's a really good question.
Weight would definitely matter for, how you're swinging it. If you just compare like a wooden Bakken to, one of those flip out, extendable toy lightsabers that are hollow plastic on the inside, you know, you can immediately tell the difference when you just are swinging it around. So that is going to have some impact. But then you also have all the other things that might be going into this. Like, if somebody is super strong, that might actually be a worse weapon for them than a big slab of metal.
I think
because it doesn't leverage their strength. However, for somebody like a kid using the, you know, monomolecular whip, that makes them an instantly 10 times greater threat than they normally would be with a knife.
Yeah, it goes back to the training. Sorry,
you're fine.
I'm gonna cut you off.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to the training aspect of it, right? If you're trained on using this weapon that is different than your large hunk of metal with an edge on it, then so much the better. But what you have there is an opportunity in the story for a really cool tension point that you can explore when you have, you know, say someone who is trained on heavier weapons pick up a monomolecular blade. Can they use it? Are they proficient with it? What sorts of try-fail cycles is that going, you know, how's that going to impact their try-fail cycles as they move through the story?
It's the same as if you know how to drive a, you know, sedan. Now try driving a big rig.
Yeah.
Yes, you know how to make car go, but things are different when it's a big rig with a trailer on it.
And it'd be cool. It could be a cool story thing.
And you can show some little scenes of them getting it wrong. You know, the young Indiana Jones picking up a whip for the first time and cutting his lip.
Yeah, very cool.
It's also a good way to bring a really competent warrior down. I've done this in a story where a guy goes to pick a fight, he assumes it's going to be a sword duel, and he's like, you know, badass with swords and axes and stuff like that, and they hand him a weapon, it's effectively an energy blade, and he's like,
I don't know how to do
Yeah,
that.
that's how fencing started.
I want to point out that despite what Star Wars says, humans are not bags of mostly water. What goes in does not always come out. So any competent blade fighter is going to want to avoid chopping as much as possible because the edge of the blade will get stuck in a bone and you will lose your weapon.
Which is why melee weapons are better in the zombie apocalypse.
And you don't want to stab near the rib cage because again your blade will get stuck in the rib cage. So that's why bladed weapons are mostly used for soft tissue, cutting arteries and things like that. Sword fighting is really, really cool. Katanas were as weak as hell. They would break if you hit a piece of wood wrong. So you've got to be very, very precise with your bladed weapons. If you're writing somebody who's authentically a knife fighter, right? They're not going to be swinging wildly because they're going to lose their weapon. It's going to get knocked out of their hand, or they're going to get stuck in somebody's arm, and then they're going to be out of a weapon.
It's probably going to look a lot more like when you see movies that portray prison fights.
Yeah.
With dudes shanking each other.
Just rapid, bang, bang, bang.
Yeah. All right, gentleman in the back.
Somebody you mentioned that you have some martial arts experience for training
Yep.
and things like that. During your creative process, when you're writing the fight scene, to what extent do you utilize that experience, or do you ever play it out?
Yes.
To actually try it out and say, this was an exciting scene because this happened to me, and
Can I tell a funny story before you answer?
Yeah.
Okay. No, you answer and then I'll tell my funny story.
Okay.
Answer.
So I actually have practice weapons in my office, and I have a martial arts partner that I can work choreography with. So.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead.
This isn't even my story. Do you guys know Christopher Rocchio? Sun Eater series? He like knocked a hole in his ceiling because he was working with a cane, demonstrating sword, and he's a big sword fan. He studied the blade. And yeah, he pissed his wife off one time because he was like crack right through the ceiling. And, yeah.
I have a 17-year-old son who every time I say, John, get over here, he's like, what now? And I'll be like, okay, stand here with your arm out like this, and I'm going to stab you 17 times. And so now whenever I approach him, he's like...
Yep. I have rubber knives and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's fun.
Hand my son a rubber knife. All right, we're going to do this.
That's cool. So, yes, last question, right here, green shirt.
I wanted to say, so my favorite part about Melee is the fact that the protagonist, there's always a chance that they might lose that fight. And, there's stakes that are different from the distance, so I had to look this up. One of my favorite scenes is from The Expanse when adrenaline Melba fights Naomi, and she has this mechanical arm that can crush things, and Naomi's shoulder gets crushed, and then she ends up like tasing her.
Yeah.
And they're in a very confined space, and you're like, oh, Naomi, who's this character I've known for 3 months, like she might die right now. Like she's, the stakes are real. So I was gonna say, what's your favorite scene that you've either written or read or seen in a show where the protagonist or the beloved character, you're like, oh crap, you might lose this and you might die right now.
Okay, so here's the deal. We have 5 minutes left,
Okay.
and I need to make sure that the panelists get a chance to tell you about themselves and their work. So I'm only going to let one of them answer, and I'm going to make you choose who gets to answer.
Oh gosh. Okay, I'm gonna pick a number 1 through 4, or 1 through, wait, how many are there?
Who's one?
You're
Number
one.
4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oz, it's you.
Oh, me? I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, it's not 4. Do you have an answer?
I have an answer.
Jeff will answer.
Okay.
Casey will answer.
Casey will
Yes.
answer. Boy, Casey.
And the Gilded Cage, it's in the fallen world, and it's this future where it's post-apocalyptic, but it fell apart because there were these corporation wars where they had agents, these very enhanced humans and with implanted skill sets. And 2 of these people are fighting at the end of the story, and they're basically, one of them shouts, we're the gods of this fallen world, because that's the level that they're at. They have these enhancements, the skills, this training, and trying to figure out how they could even kill each other is always a challenge, because they're superhumans. Especially since one has a great advantage because he has the implanted, he knows Kung Fu, as opposed to the other guy who had to train and never actually trained because that wasn't his job. Trying to figure out how to bludgeon them down. It was really just a matter of wearing them down at the end. It was, I had to make it so they'd taken so many bullets by that point and getting stabbed so many times they fought their way into so many other different things, but they were just basically exhausted by the end.
Awesome.
And then I had to throw in another twist of somebody else, distracting them for the last second.
Very cool. Very cool. That was a good scene.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, you guys have been awesome. Real quick, we'll start at this end of the table. We'll go down, tell them which work of yours they should buy and where they can find you online and where they can find you at the con. And you have like 10 seconds.
I'm in America's Martin 3500. You can come get a signed copy of Against All Odds, which is the book you should be reading. And you can find me on jeffreyhaskell.com or Amazon.com.
Excellent. So I'll go last. Go.
Mark Stallings. I'm in the Shadow Alley Press booth in America's Mark Floor 2. You can find me at markstallings.com. All my stuff is online on Kindle if you want.
John R. Osborne. I didn't like that. I'm John R. Osborne. You can find me on Amazon or John R. Osborne or at johnrosborne.com. Get my urban fantasy series of Legion Course, start with Reluctant Druid, or for military science fiction action, start with An Axe Falls.
Very good. Stuart.
Title.
I am Stuart Grosse. You can find me on Amazon. I have 160 something titles on my Amazon account right now. Most of them serial novellas, most of them in Kindle Unlimited. Best thing to, for melee weapons for me would probably be Memoirs of a Supervillain.
Very cool. Thanks. Casey.
CaseyMoores.net. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. I think Instagram is Casey Moops, because that's my alter ego. That was my call sign in the military. I also got cards up here if you guys want to come grab them. And this is my last panel of the weekend, but I'll be back at DragonCon again. Woo-hoo! Casey Moores will return to Dragon.
And I'm Kacey Ezell. You can find me online at CaseyEzell.net or .com. I own both. For the rest of the con, I'm basically over in the Cortland Grand doing alternate history programming, so if that's your jam, come say hi. And you should buy and read Minds of Men, which is my love letter to aviation history, and there is a very cool stabbing scene involving a knife and a dark and a Nazi. So there you go.
Again, it's about a book.